Hi, I'm Bliss Cua Lim, a film professor at the University of California, Irvine. If you clicked on this audio essay, then you must have a working idea of Asian horror cinema. Most people assume that the label refers to scary movies with distinctly Asian characteristics. Well, as it turns out, that assumption of a unifying Asianness or cultural homogeneity is what many scholars of Asian cinema, myself included, have challenged. Asian horror is not a homogeneous genre, nor is it a regionally inclusive category, since it refers primarily to scary movies from just a handful of East Asian countries like Japan, South Korea, and Hong Kong. This means that lists of quote-unquote Asian horror typically exclude noteworthy occult movies from other parts of Asia. You don't see many examples of Bollywood or Philippine cinema included. Dating from the early 2000s, so-called Asian horror originated as a branding strategy and a marketing label promoted by a UK DVD company, Tartan Asian Extreme, and by pan-Asian production companies like Hong Kong's Applause Pictures. These companies hope to compete with Hollywood fare by enticing international audiences with polished genre movies marketed under a vague notion of, quote, Asianness. So rather than taking the term at face value, we can disambiguate so-called Asian horror by understanding it as a name for various negotiations and contradictions involved when movies try for multi-scalar appeal. The three ghost films and shows I'm discussing here all try to appeal to local audiences in particular countries, regional audiences within Asia, and transnational audiences throughout the globe. First, the ghost film Going Home is a 2002 short by Hong Kong director Peter Chan, a co-founder of Applause Pictures. It was released as part of a Tartan Asia Extreme DVD title, 3 Extremes 2, a trio of arty shorts from different Asian countries. Going Home centers on a divorced policeman and his young son who move into a dilapidated Hong Kong apartment building next to a mysterious couple who practice traditional Chinese medicine. Going Home is a fascinating example of the internal contradiction of Asian horror, which is that its mode of address is simultaneously inclusive and exclusive. That is, it wants to speak to all sorts of audiences inclusively by playing with widely recognizable genre conventions like haunted buildings and spooky children. But it also offers more exclusive pleasures to audiences who understand the culturally specific elements of the film, like its bilingual Cantonese and Mandarin dialogue, its allusions to traditional Chinese medicine, and its references to Maoist and post-Maoist history. Even if you don't know about all the stuff I just mentioned, the film still works as an unusual romantic ghost story. But if you do understand its Chinese context, the film is even more fascinating. Going Home is emblematic of how Asian horror aspires to balance the global legibility of the horror genre with the more local and regional appeal of cultural and historical specificity. My second example is Nonzee Nimibutr's 1999 Thai film Nang Nak, about the ghost of a woman who died in childbirth. For local Thai audiences, Nang Nak does not evoke the mystery and suspense typical of the horror film because the folklore is so well known. Rather, its domestic appeal lies in its nostalgia for old Siam. But for an international film festival audience, its appeal lies elsewhere: high production value and polished period settings that depict 19th century Siam in exotic ways. Fast forward to a third example from our present-day COVID era. The 2021 Netflix detective horror series Trese is an animated adaptation of a Filipino graphic novel with a cult following. Ghostly folkloric characters stand out, such as the White Lady, or wronged female ghost, and the vengeful fetus, or Tianak. Trese exemplifies Netflix's attempt to establish itself as a global streaming media giant with niche appeal in a country that boasts one of the highest percentages of heavy online users in Southeast Asia. This is part of Netflix's goal of becoming, quote, the world's first global TV network, in the words of its co-founder, Reed Hastings. To do so, Netflix has produced local language original content in more than 20 countries. It wants to make addictive shows that will draw a mix of domestic, regional, and international audiences worldwide. To that end, Trese is clearly influenced by supernatural US TV shows like The X-Files, which help it to be globally palatable. For local viewers, Trese reworks Philippine folklore to offer a social allegory of police brutality, corruption, and human rights violations under the Duterte regime. Its moody visual style, showcasing the gritty urban geography of Metro Manila, resonates with Filipino and diasporic audiences, But while publicity hyped its Filipino and Filipino-American cast, writers, and producers, calling Trese the first Filipino animated series to debut on Netflix, it was actually a transnational production. Trese's production company is headquartered in Indonesia and Singapore. Its animators were based not in the Philippines, but in LA and Seoul, and it was distributed by Netflix, headquartered in California with offices in 10 countries. The push and pull between localism, regionalism, and globalism that characterizes Asian horror is alive and well in the online streaming wars.